I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, watching the digital clock on the microwave flicker from 2:47 to 2:48, and I thought about what my daughter had said to her husband when she believed I couldn't hear her. She hadn't whispered. That was the part I kept coming back to. She hadn't even bothered to lower her voice. It was the second week of November, the kind of grey that only Southern Ontario knows how to do. Not dramatic, not stormy, just relentlessly flat, as though the sky had given up trying. I had been living with my daughter and her husband for 11 months by then. The arrangement had been their idea, not mine. I want to be clear about that because later, when everything unraveled, my son-in-law would tell people I had inserted myself into their lives. That was not how it happened. My name is Vivienne. Wait. No, I've told this story so many times in my head, always rehearsed, always careful. Let me start the way it actually began. My name is Nora. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse at Hamilton General Hospital, the last 12 of those in palliative care, where I really learned, what it means to face something you cannot outrun. When my husband passed in the spring of 2021, I sold the house we'd shared for 38 years, took a small apartment in Dundas, and started the business of learning how to be a widow. I was managing. That's the honest word for it, managing. Not thriving, but managing. I had my garden in the summers, my book club on the second Thursday of every month, and a small but real financial cushion that most people would not have guessed existed. My husband had been an accountant. He had been careful with money in the quiet, unfussy way that careful people are, and when he died, he left me with a paid-off mortgage that became the equity for a very comfortable investment portfolio, a defined benefit pension from the hospital that still deposited $3,400 into my account every month, and savings I had never touched because we had never needed to. I was not a wealthy woman in any flashy sense. I drove a 2019 Civic. I shopped at No Frills. But I was, without any drama about it, financially secure for the rest of my life. My daughter did not know the full picture. I had raised her to understand that money was private, and so she had assumptions that I let sit uncorrected. She assumed the pension was modest. She assumed the investments were modest. She assumed that after selling the Dundas apartment, I was essentially living on what I had left, which she imagined was not very much. This matters. It matters because of what she said and what she assumed when she said it. My daughter's name is Serena. She is 41. She married her husband, a man I will only call my son-in-law because that is what he was, and what he stopped deserving to be called anything else. 9 years ago, in a ceremony in Niagara-on-the-Lake, that I helped pay for, though that was never mentioned again after the thank you cards were sent. He sells commercial real estate. He does well enough. He has the particular confidence of a man who has always been told he is doing well enough, which means he does not feel the need to be kind unless kindness serves him. Serena is not a bad person. I have thought about this long and carefully, the way you do when you love someone and are also trying to be honest about them. She is not bad, but she has a habit of deciding what is convenient and then building her ethics around the decision. And she married a man who is the same. And together they have created a household where the thing that matters most is the smooth running of the household. Their children, my grandchildren, are 2 boys, 8 and 11 now, Kip and Zachary. I call them what their parents call them Though Zachary asked me once if he could be Zach and his father said it sounded informal. The boys are the reason I said yes when Serena called me that February morning 2 years ago and asked if I would consider moving in. She made it sound generous. Looking back, I can see she also made it sound efficient. We just think it would be good for everyone. Mum, you'd have company. We'd have help with the boys. The house has the whole basement suite. It's been sitting empty since we stopped renting it out during COVID. She paused. And honestly, with everything going on in the world, we'd feel better knowing you weren't alone. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I called my friend Paulette, who had done something similar with her own daughter in Kitchener, and who told me, in her blunt way, to make sure the terms were written down. I called my financial advisor and asked him nothing relevant, just talked around the topic until he asked me directly if I was thinking of cohabitating with family. And when I said yes, he sent me a pamphlet about co-ownership agreements and a gentle email that said documentation was a kindness to everyone involved. I wrote up an agreement. It wasn't a legal document in any formal sense. I'm a nurse, not a lawyer, but I had sat with dying people long enough to know that what tears families apart is never the big things. It's the unspoken things. The things that everyone assumed and no one clarified. The agreement said that I would contribute $1,200 a month toward household expenses, which was below market rate for a basement suite in their neighborhood, but reflected that I was also providing significant childcare. It said that I would have full and independent use of the suite and the separate entrance. It said that if the arrangement ended for any reason, I would have 60 days' notice, and that, within those 60 days, neither party would be required to justify their decision to the other. And then, almost as an afterthought, though it wasn't an afterthought at all, I added a paragraph about the $47,000 personal loan I was making to Serena and her husband to cover a renovation they'd been planning, the kind of renovation that made the house worth more and that they had said they couldn't quite swing without help. The loan was at no interest. It was repayable over 5 years. The first payment was due 18 months after the renovation was completed. Serena read the agreement quickly, the way she reads most things. Her husband didn't read it at all. He initialed the pages because she told him to, flipping through while he was still talking about the contractor's quote. I watched him do it. I did not say anything. I moved in on the 1st of April. For the first 3 months, it was fine. More than fine, sometimes. Kip had a habit of coming down to my suite on Saturday mornings to watch nature documentaries. And those Saturday mornings, as the saying, the best hours I have spent in the last several years of my life. He would tuck his feet under him on the end of my sofa and eat the toast I made him and ask questions that an 8-year-old shouldn't know how to ask. And I would feel, for an hour or two, like the persons I had been when Serena was small. But things shifted by summer, quietly, the way things shift when people have decided something but haven't said it yet. Serena began scheduling things without telling me. Not big things. Nobody sat me down and said, "Your services are no longer needed, Mum." It was the small recalibrations that told you the real story. The evening she signed Kip up for a swim clinic on Tuesdays without mentioning it, so I arrived at the school to pick him up and found no one there. The week her husband decided, without discussion, that the suite entrance needed to be accessed through the main house. For security reasons, which lasted 12 days before I told him quietly that I would be returning the key he'd had copied and using my own. The dinner parties where I was not included, and which I only knew about because I could hear the voices through the floor. None of these things was impossible to live with on its own. Together they made a particular sound, the way individual notes make a chord, and the chord I was hearing was not a welcoming one. In September, I had a routine appointment with my GP. She referred me to a neurologist after noticing something she described as a slight asymmetry in my resting tremor, a thing I had noticed myself, but had chosen, with the professional denial of someone who has spent 3 decades in healthcare, not to look at directly. 2 appointments later, I was sitting in a small office on King Street West in Hamilton with a neurologist who had a very gentle way of delivering information, and she told me I had early-stage Parkinson's disease. Early stage. Those 2 words do a lot of work. They mean not yet. They mean you have time. They mean the life you are living is still yours and will be for some years, and the tremor in your left hand is something we can manage together, with medication and with movement and with the kind of deliberate attention to your own body that you have spent your whole career directing at other people's bodies. I drove home. I am still perfectly safe to drive. My neurologist was very clear, and I sat in the parking lot of the Fortinos on Barton Street for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I tracked it. Then I went in and bought the groceries on my list and drove back to the house and made dinner for the boys because it was my night. And after they were in bed, I called my friend back home in Dundas and I cried for a while. And then I stopped. And then I thought about what I was going to do. I told Serena 2 days later. I sat down with her at the kitchen table. Her kitchen table, upstairs. And I told her calmly and factually, the way I have learned to give difficult news, which is to say directly and without the softening that actually makes things harder. I told her it was early stage. I told her my neurologist was excellent. I told her the medication was already helping. I told her that I was not asking for anything except that she know. She cried, which I had expected. She hugged me, which I had needed more than I let on. She said everything would be fine, which is what people say. What happened 4 days later, I did not expect. I had come up through the interior stairs, which I normally did not do, because I valued the habit of using my own entrance. But the back path was icy and I had not wanted to risk it. I had knocked. There had been no answer, and I had come in quietly, the way you do in a house where you've lived long enough to know which rooms are occupied and which aren't. They were in the kitchen. The door was barely open. Serena's voice was the one I heard first, which was unusual because in arguments her husband was usually the louder one. She was saying, "And I will not dress this up. I'm not prepared to become her caregiver, Garrett. That is not what I signed up for." Garrett said something I couldn't quite hear. "No, listen to me," Serena said. "It's going to progress. You know what Parkinson's looks like at the end. She was in palliative care for 12 years. She knows better than anyone what it looks like. And she's going to be terrified of ending up like that. She's going to need more and more from us, and I can't. I'm not her nurse. I'm her daughter, but I'm not her nurse, and I need you to understand the difference." Another murmur from Garrett. "She has her pension," Serena said. "She can go into one of those retirement places. There are good ones. She won't like it, but she'll be safe. That's what her money is for. She should start looking now, while she still can." I stood in the hallway for a long time. I did not cry. I want to say that not because I'm proud of it. I don't think it was strength, exactly, but because it's true, and this is the part of the story where the truth matters most. I did not cry. I felt something that I can only describe as a very cold clarity, the kind that comes to you sometimes in emergency situations when there is no time for feelings and your body simply decides to become functional. I had felt it before I recognized it. I let it do its work. I went back downstairs. I sat at my table. I looked at my left hand, which was steadier than it had been 3 months ago because the medication was working. And I thought about what I had built over 67 years and what I intended to do with it. The next morning, I called my financial advisor. I told him I was going to need some clarity on a few things. He came to the house. My suite. 2 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, when Serena was at work and the boys were at school and Garrett was showing properties in Ancaster. We sat at my table with folders and a pot of coffee, and we talked for 2 hours. The total picture, when it was laid out plainly, was this. Between my investment portfolio, my pension income capitalized over my projected life expectancy, the equity from the Dundas house sale, and various smaller accounts and bonds husband had kept quietly ticking over for decades, I was looking at net assets of approximately $1.3 million. My monthly income from the pension alone covered my living expenses twice over. I had not touched the investments in 3 years. They had grown. My financial advisor looked at me for a moment after he said the number. He asked me if I had family who knew about this. I told him I was about to begin the process of making sure the right people knew the right amount. The next call I made was to a lawyer, not a friend, a proper estate lawyer in downtown Hamilton with a good firm, someone my advisor recommended. I made an appointment for the following week, and then I called a property management company and asked them to send me listings for independent senior living in Hamilton and Burlington. Not care homes, not nursing facilities, but the kind of well-designed apartment communities for people over 55 that had started appearing everywhere in the last decade. Modern, private, social if you wanted it, and quiet if you didn't. I found a place in Burlington, right on the lake. 2 bedrooms. One for me, one for when the boys stayed over and they would stay over. The monthly fee was $2,900 all inclusive, which was less than my pension covered, and they had a garden program and a woodworking shop I had no interest in and a book exchange I absolutely did, and a physiotherapy program that my neurologist said was exactly what she would have recommended. The building had views of Lake Ontario that made me feel, when I walked through with the manager, that I had been holding my breath for 11 months and could now, perhaps, exhale. I put down a deposit that afternoon. I had a move-in date 4 weeks out. I did not tell Serena. I told her on a Thursday evening, the week before the move. I waited until Garrett was home because I had learned in my years of managing difficult situations that you say the hard thing when all the people who need to hear it are in the room. I made tea. I set it on the table. I sat across from them both and I told them I had found an apartment and would be moving out in 8 days. Serena stared at me. What do you mean you found an apartment? An independent living community, I said. In Burlington, on the lake. It's quite lovely, Mum. Those places are expensive. How are you? She stopped. I'm fine, I said. Financially, I am very fine. I should have been clearer about that earlier. Garrett sat up straighter. He had been leaning back with the particular posture of a man who has not expected to be part of an important conversation. How fine, he said. I looked at him for a moment. Fine enough that I've also spoken to a lawyer about the loan agreement, I said. And I've given notice that I'll be exercising the repayment acceleration clause which means the outstanding balance of $47. 000 becomes due in full within 90 days instead of over the remaining 4 years. The silence in that kitchen had a texture to it. There's no acceleration clause, Garrett said. I never agreed to. You initialed page 3, I said. The clause is in the second paragraph. It's triggered in the event of a material change in the living arrangement as defined in section 1. His face did something I won't describe in detail because it wasn't pretty, and I don't think I need to catalog other people's uglier moments. Serena said my name. She said it the way she used to say it when she was a child and had done something she needed to come clean about. Mum, did you hear us? The other night? I came in through the inside stairs, I said. The path was icy. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked, for the first time in months, like my daughter, not the woman who had built a convenient life and was hoping I would fit inside it without altering anything, but the girl I had driven to her first day of nursing college, the one who had cried in the car and held my hand and said, I hope I'm as good at this as you are someday. She had not become a nurse, but she had said that, and I had believed she meant it. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I was scared. I was just scared, and I said something terrible, and I'm sorry. I believe she was scared. I believe that's true. I also know that fear doesn't always excuse what it makes us say, and that apologies, however real, are not the same as understanding. Those are different things. My decades in palliative care taught me that people sometimes say the truest things about themselves when they think no one is listening. What Serena said was real. She had meant it when she said it. The apology was also real. Both things were true. I moved out on a Saturday. My friend drove up from Dundas and helped me. The boys were there that morning. Serena had told them I was moving, and Kip cried in a way that broke something in me, held onto my arm and asked if he'd done something wrong, and I sat on the floor of my empty suite with him and told him very clearly, because children need clarity more than softness, that he had done nothing wrong, that I loved him, that I would see him every other weekend, that we would keep having our Saturday mornings. Only now they would happen at my place and we would be able to see the lake. Zachary, who had started going by Zach in quiet defiance of his father, shook my hand. He was 11 and he shook my hand. I don't think I will forget that. The 90 days for the loan repayment came and went. Garrett called my lawyer 3 times. There were emails. There was a conversation in which Garrett suggested the acceleration clause might not be enforceable, which it was, and my lawyer communicated this with professional brevity. The $47,000 arrived in my account on day 87 in 2 separate transfers. I deposited it into a registered education savings account I had opened for the boys. I did not tell Garrett this. I told Serena because she was their mother and she had a right to know. She cried when I told her. I have been in Burlington for 14 months now. My neurologist is very pleased with how I am managing. The lake is exactly as I hoped it would be, gray in November, blinding in July, occasionally a strange and beautiful green in the shoulder seasons that I have no explanation for. I walk along it most mornings. I have met a woman named Josephine in my building who is 74, a attorney, and who has strong opinions about everything. And we have coffee on Tuesdays and argue agreeably about books and occasionally about whether I handled the situation with my daughter correctly. Josephine thinks I should have taken Serena back to some kind of mediated conversation sooner. I'm not sure she's wrong. What I did instead was slower. I invited Serena to lunch, just the two of us, about 6 weeks after the move. We went to a cafe near the waterfront and we sat there for nearly 3 hours. And she talked and I listened, and I talked and she listened, and it was not comfortable and it was not resolved, and it was also somehow necessary. We have been doing it every few weeks since. We are not where we were. I'm not sure where we were before was as good as I had believed, and so perhaps that's not the destination anymore. The boys come every second weekend. They sleep in the second bedroom. Kip has discovered that I have a good telescope on my balcony and has become, in the last several months, intensely interested in astronomy, which is not something I know very much about, which means I have been learning alongside him. Zach has a kind of still watchfulness about him that reminds me of his grandfather, which I find strange and wonderful and occasionally devastating in the best way. Last month, Serena asked me whether I had thought about the future, not in the way she had that evening in the kitchen, but carefully, tentatively, like someone who knew they had forfeited the right to ask carelessly. She asked whether I had thought about what I would need and want down the road, and whether there were decisions she should know about. I told her yes, I had thought about it. I had a plan, and a good lawyer, and a financial advisor I trusted, and a neurologist who was on my team, and a building with a care continuum if I eventually needed it, and friends and grandchildren who knew they were loved, and a view of Lake Ontario that cost me nothing beyond my monthly fee, and which I considered, frankly, the best purchase I had ever made. I told her, "You don't need to worry about me, but I would like it if you kept showing up to these lunches." She said she would. The magnolia tree outside my old house in Dundas blooms every May, reliably, even after a bad winter. My husband planted it when Serena was 4, and she used to think the blossoms were so impractical, too big and too white, and too easily ruined by a late frost. She was right, and they bloomed every year anyway. I think about that tree more than you'd expect for something I no longer own. I left because I had to. I am here because I chose to be. That difference between obligation and choice is one I am still learning to live inside at 67, with a tremor in my left hand and a view of the lake and a grandson who is beginning to understand the names of stars. It turns out that's enough. It is, actually, more than enough.